Hi, I'm Sean Kramer. I do C++ stuff sometimes. It's fun. Today I want to talk about ADL, which is short for Argument Dependent Lookup. Which is something really crazy because it sort of breaks namespaces, and that's fun. Right. So, argument dependent lookup is when the compiler sees an expression of function call, such as function x, and instead of just saying, oh, I know function, and it doesn't accept the type of object that x represents, and it says, no, compiler error. No, instead of that, it looks at x and says, I know where x is defined. It's defined in a namespace. I'm going to go look in that namespace for the function. That's weird because we always expect namespaces to hide things away from where we are unless we explicitly include them using namespace or using the full name of the function. So to explain, here's a simple example of ADL. I have a function main which calls a function fabulate with an instance of the object a from detail. At no point here do I include the namespace detail. I don't even write detail : fabulate either. Still works, compiles, it returns 42. So easily, it says, oh, I don't know where fabulate is, and sees there's a detail here, goes up to namespace detail, sees there's an instance of fabulate that accepts an A, and says, I'm going to call that, hooray! Which is awesome, right? Because this does what you expect it to do. You're saying, here, do this with that, and it just works. I love ADL. But it can make some very, very strange things happen. Right. So, here's a slightly more complicated example where we have a function template which refers to this fabulate function. By the way, for those not getting it, fabulate is short for making something fabulous. So, in this case, we have two places where we can make things fabulous. We can either fabulate in detail namespace, or we can fabulate in the rocket namespace. In both cases, we also have a class A. That's probably confusing. Oh well, no worries. So we have this function template called zap, which accepts a type P and an array. Well, that's incorrect. It accepts an array, and it just takes the first one, multiplies it by its size, and calls fabulate the first one. But we can call this in two different ways, right? I mean, and these both will compile. In one way, we take an array of detail A, and we call zap on it. And the other way, it's rocket A, and we call zap on it. And the compiler at compile time decides which one to call. So this is great for performance because all the decision making is done at compile time. And that's nice, but it is also somewhat confusing. But the point is that it allows you to establish a customization point. We have, because we have the same function that calls this other free function, zap, call, and fabulate, we can establish a new namespace for whatever object we want to feed into zap, and it will call that. If we wanted fabulate to return 42, we would have it use it using the detail namespace. If we wanted it to return 51, we would use the rocket namespace. This applies to all kinds of template function templates. So anything like an algorithm or any template you use can use these sort of ADL customization points. But to further go into detail about how this one works, the first case says detail A. Oh, that's what the data type is. So when we look at zap, that actually causes T to result in detail A, which then makes us think, oh, detail A, we should look at namespace detail, and therefore this is the fabulate we should call. Ta-da! Resolved. Same thing for B. So, as I mentioned, one of the things we can do is use this sort of technique for customization of the SLID library algorithms. So in this case, I have a shortened version of very naive implementation of accumulate, which just takes an init and two iterators, and it keeps advancing the first iterator until it reaches the second iterator, and just keeps adding and adding and adding. The customization point for me here is the plus, which I'm going to then overload here. In this case, I'm abusing the accumulate algorithm to create a JSON representation of my object. So I have this object of some kind, in this case, the array, which is a detail A array. And I tell it, well, start with a JSON string and just keep going plus, 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 plus. And because in the detail namespace I implemented the plus operator, it just works. So that's kind of awesome. That's almost readable too. That's it.